Well, I promised you or told you we were going to talk about somewhat the beautiful thing of the Bible, and it's about law today. So everyone, we're going to learn all the laws, and we're going to go do them, and anyone that does it wrong, you're out. So we're going to talk a little bit about law today, some of the things that Jesus actually spoke about it. We're going to be primarily in Matthew 12, so if you want to stick a thumb in Matthew 12, you can also, a couple other places we'll be in 1 Samuel 21. I'm going to hit a couple of small verses. I will back up into Matthew 11 at one point, but I'll give you these addresses as we go. I'm going to be in Numbers 28. So really, Matthew 12, 1 Samuel 21, and Numbers 28 will be some of the ones that I hit along the way. And the other ones are just short ones. You don't have to turn to them. In fact, if you don't want to turn to any of them, you're great. Just trust me, like the Lance version, you're good with that. I'll read directly. My ESV version is what I'll be using primarily today. Well, I always like to start with something a little bit silly, usually. That's just who I am. But I have actually today, if you could go back and hit the lights again, Dan, if you don't mind. I've got a PowerPoint we're going to start with. There are about a dozen. The other one. Yeah, there's more than one of you right there. Point through both of you. So, yeah, hit this. This is a PowerPoint presentation. And there are about a dozen of these. Most are self-explanatory. These are about laws. Before you hit it, they're all laws. And so they're like rules or laws that were put out there. And then people went on the internet and made a picture with them and had some fun with it. Imagine that, people on the internet having fun with rules and laws and posted images. So yeah, hit start slideshow on that, and we'll get to see these. You see it on the left? There's a button, should be a start slideshow button on there. Up at the top on that PowerPoint one. Do you not see it? I can come over there. I'm not afraid.
Yeah, I think you need to come over.
All right, let me do it. This will be all part of the. This is all planned, so you guys. No, you're good. Oh, it's gone.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right there it is.
Yeah, click on, see if it comes up. It's not there anymore. I do not know how we got rid of it. Here, open this. I still want it. Yeah. Yeah, now open it from there. All right. There you go. Now it's a start. Yeah, start slideshow on the. Did you see that part of it? Yeah, slideshow. Go right there.
Okay.
Now play from the start. There we go. Technology, gotta love it. All right, so look at this one. Most of them are self-explanatory. All right, go hit the next one. Just hit the space bar and go. Look at this guy. Trinity College Library. No cells, no drinking, no burgers, no eating, no smoking. He's just doing it all. All right. No bills. Post no bills. They're all pictures, they're all bills. Oh yeah. Some of these can have a little extra. This girl had a lot of fun with this one. She's obviously Chinese. Yeah. All right, click the next one. No smoking alcohol. I don't think that's a good idea. Gotta be in a really good. How about this one? This one's hilarious. 1,000 people done. No, you're wrong. Another one. Like, don't even think of parking here, it says. He's thinking about it. Okay, this one. Do not use blade to open. You got to remove your blade if he's opening the box. I thought it was funny. I love this one. The bird does not care. How about that one? That's kind of selfie. This is great. Do not print labels unnecessarily. Okay. Look, insert straw here. I'll put the straw where I want to. Thank you very much. I think that's the last one. All right. Last one, go back on. Oh, man. That way I can't be blamed for the bad joke. But truth be known, I get those bad jokes off the internet anyway, so, you know.
But Lance, you always had a very warped sense of
I did. You're exactly right. It's nothing new. I like to laugh at the awkward things, right? All right. We're in Matthew 12 today. So you can go to Matthew 12. That's where we're going to start. I'll be reading a few verses there, and then we'll talk about what all is going on. This is Jesus. He's in Matthew 12. It tells a little bit about where he was. He talks a little bit, tells a little bit of the background. I'm just going to read Matthew 12, beginning verse 1. I'm going to read the first 7 verses to start. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath. His disciples were hungry. They began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. When the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Hey, look, your disciples, what are they doing? It's not lawful to do that on the Sabbath." And he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God, and he ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only the priests. Or have you not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath, and they're guiltless? I tell you something, greater than the temple is here, and if you had known what this means, I desire mercy, not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Now, Jesus actually makes several references to Old Testament laws and truths and scripture that they would have known really well right here. And so there's a lot going on. But I'm going to give you some background of what's going on with the law in general. I've mentioned some of this before, but the law, first and foremost, for all of the people of Israel, and definitely at this time, goes first to the 10 Commandments, but the Torah, or the 5 books that Moses put together, or is credited for. And inside of there are actually 613 commandments, do's and don'ts, that are in the Torah. They've got them numbered. So they have 613 of those. But in an effort to not break any of the 613, they layered on what's called Mishnah. So if you take this layered, so okay, we got 613 do's and don'ts. What they did in order to not mess up any of those, they put another boundary outside of that in the Mishnah. And the Mishnah is 3,000 more laws that encompass this Torah laws, the 613. And then, about the time, that was from oral tradition, and by the time Jesus was around, this stuff was already being ratified. But by 300 AD, a little time later, they actually add what's called the Talmud. And the Talmud adds 6,000 more outside of that. So you got about 9,600 or so laws, rules, do's, and don'ts. There's a lot. There is a tremendous amount. So this is kind of where Jesus is. He is there among their scribes and Pharisees and lawyers, and they have ideas, and they don't even agree with each other. There are a lot of times they're picking his brain to try to figure out which side he's going to land on, to whether he's going to agree with them or not. And sometimes he does. He says, "Let me tell you, this side actually is kind of right." And it's actually, he's not picking side. They just accidentally got on his side, to be truth be known. But so they always look for a way to trap Jesus. And so he's really laying down the law, if you will, through here. He's interpreting it or giving them snippets of what the law had and giving them instead the heart behind what the law really meant. And they're always trying, remember, to get him. They're always looking out to get him. He sees the law as a gift from God, as a tutor. In fact, I was reading about this one commentary. They were talking to a Jewish man. He said, to understand how I feel about the law and how Jewish people feel about the law, you have to understand that we don't have all of these rules and laws to just put more burden. The idea, he said, was that they're layered out there because we want to be abundantly obedient. We want to go above and beyond. Like, if I have to tithe, I'm going to go ahead and give 30% just to make sure I cover it. But do it out of unction. Do it out of burden. And do it out of the feeling that I can do more or don't more in order to please God. He gave the example, this one Jewish man. He said, my wife one time, she said that she was pregnant. She wanted some oranges. And he said, I walked to the store. I walked to the store and it was in the middle of the snow. There was snow and ice on the ground. And it was uphill both ways. He gives that whole story. He's just giving, it was so hard to go. But she wanted an orange. But what I did when I got to the store, I bought an entire bag of oranges. I knew that she only wanted one, and it would probably throw the rest out. He said, but if I brought back this entire bag of oranges, I'm showing the abundance of my love for her. Then she can choose even among all those oranges and get the one that she wants. So this is kind of the heart of why they're trying to do that. So you get why they started doing that. And the reality is this is kind of what we do. We want to show our love or our relationship to some other person, and we tend to sometimes lavish, to go above and beyond in order to prove it. And sometimes our motivation is kind of like this too. It's because we feel the obligation to instead of the heart of it. And Jesus is always pointing back to say, listen, it really needs to be about the heart of your motivation of why you do what you do. And he gives them these 3 Old Testament principles. I'm going to unpack those in a little bit. He told them you're missing the heart of the law. Matthew 23, just a quick reference, Matthew 23:23. You don't have to turn there if you want to, you can. Jesus said, woe to you, scribes and Pharisees and hypocrites. You tithe mint and dill and cumin, and you've neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice and mercy and faithfulness. These you ought to have done without neglecting the others. Interestingly, he tells them, look, you guys have gone above and beyond. Not only are you tithing, you're tithing in all the seasonings in your cupboard. Luckily for them, they don't have 280 like we do now. Just mint and cumin and some of those things. They were tithing on the littlest and smallest things, which was, he didn't say don't do that anymore. He said, look, but the reality is you should be thinking of the heart behind it, which is justice and mercy and faithfulness, because this is really what God is after. When you're giving of those things, you're thinking about the reason you're doing it, whatever it is that you're giving. And so there's that little miniature thing I wanted to mention about tithe. And I think that Jesus says that he did not come to eliminate the law, but to fulfill it. And so he mentions tithe in some places, and it's like, you think that 10% you're doing great, but the reality is everything is God's. So you need to get a heart that is anything that God might ask of you, you would do it. Like the rich young ruler says, give away everything you have and come and follow me. It's like, whoa, I don't know if I can do that. But if we have the heart and the reality that we're always ready, willing, and able, whatever the level might be, that if God asks for something, we're ready to do that. Whether it's tithes, gifts, offering, talent, talk, our treasure, anything that we have, our commodities of life are at his disposal because he is mercy and he is faithful. He is trustworthy. We're not trying to impress God or get into better standing with him. And in fact, if that's our motivation, we can give everything we have. In fact, it's right out of the Corinthian letter. You can give everything you have. You can go on missionary journeys. You can speak with the tongue of men and angels, and all of that's great. But if you have not love, you're just like a clanging brass, a sounding cymbal. He runs to motivation over and over again. And Jesus is getting back to that same heart. So the law, then, he calls it our tutor. It's the thing which teaches us until we know. I think about how we teach our children and how they need laws because they just don't understand when they're very, very small. I mean, running in the street, it's a big wide open space. Why not? It looks great. Pet that kid, just go pet the kitty cat. I don't care if it's a tiger, he looks fluffy. I want to hug him. That's dangerous. They love sticking things in light sockets, and I think it's because they look like little faces. I do. It's just look, let's put something in the man's face. We put covers on there. And if we see a child go, we say, don't do that. As they're about to run in the street, we'll scream, yell, we'll throw something, we'll flail, we'll flop. We'll do whatever we can because we know it's not a good idea to run in the street. And if you have a tiger in your yard, I really wonder about where you live and what's going on. But if you did, you certainly don't want your child playing with a tiger. You know, these are the things we recognize that there's danger. We don't want our child going there. We set up laws and boundaries and say, don't do it. So the law is a tutor until we have a time of understanding. The understanding that we have is based not out of the drudgery of having to do or don't what God said, but because we love him. And this is what he's going towards. Over and over again, Jesus gets back to this. So why do we do what we do? There are these 613. In fact, it's interesting. There are some that would say that Jesus, on multiple occasions, he's accused over and over again by scribes and Pharisees and lawyers and anybody that could at the time of trying to trap him. You're breaking the law. Hey, you're breaking the law. Hey, your disciples are breaking the law. And they do that here. Law, 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 law. And he says, guys, you're missing the point. And he unpacks it. The reality is there is no evidence anywhere that Jesus ever actually broke any of the laws as God intended them. In fact, he never did. You can go to all 613, and there are interpretations that they layered on them, layered on them, layered on them. It's amazing how what we even do with our modern day laws. I mean, how many times the Supreme Court changes the interpretation of law? But does that really, there is a law that stands behind even our laws of the land. There is a true law. And that law at the heart of all of us should be our heart towards God, our Creator. And Jesus said, and then second, our neighbors, ourselves. Love God, love your neighbor as you love yourself. These are the basis of all law, he says. And that continues to be so. Interestingly, I'll hit on that again in a little bit. Not everyone believes law hits the same way. Just a teaser. So we have then that what happens, there are 3 Old Testament passages that Jesus mentioned that we just kind of went through. I want to hit on each of these 3 Old Testament passages. Because Jesus said to them, he said, have you not heard or have you not read? And he drops one, then he drops another, and he drops another. And the first one is out of 1 Samuel 21. So if you want to turn over to 1 Samuel 21, he mentions, did you guys not hear about, or did you not read about, or do you not know about King David and what he did? Your disciples are eating grain on the Sabbath. This is terrible. He said, well, and he references his story. Do you not know about King David on the Sabbath? So let me read about what happened with King David on the Sabbath. Context. This is one of the times that David is just running from Saul. Saul's out to kill him. So he and his guys they're running across the land, trying to take care of it. So that's the context of what's up. David came to Nob, to Ahimelech, the priest. So he goes to the priest. And Ahimelech came to meet David, trembling, and said to him, they know that David's a bad dude at the time, and he's like, okay, David showed up, there's a lot of war going on, I'm not sure what's up. Anyway, why are you alone and no one with you? David said to Ahimelech the priest, well, the king has charged me with a matter and said to me, let no one know anything of the matter about which I send you, in which I've charged you. I've made an appointment with young men for such and such place. Now then, what do you have on hand? Give me 5 loaves of bread, or whatever is here. The priest answered David and said, I have no common bread on hand, but do you have some holy bread? If the young men have kept themselves from women, and David said to the priest, look, truly, women have been kept from us always when we're going on an expedition. These vessels, these men are holy, even when it's an ordinary journey. That's just not how they are. How much more today will their vessels be holy when we're on a mission from the king? So the priest went ahead and gave him the holy bread. For there was no bread there but the bread of the presence. This is the show bread. It's in it's not the Holy of Holies, but the inner sanctum where only the priests go, not where the commoners can go. Which is removed from before the Lord to be replaced by hot bread on the day it's taken away. So a little bit of background on what this bread is that he's giving them. The showbread was placed in the temple, not in the holiest, but the inner court, not the holy of holies, but the holy place, which is just outside the inner temple. And inside of there, it's only where the priests could go. And part of it was they had this bread that they cooked and they would place regularly. And it is a picture of the presence of God with the people. It is, when we talk a lot of times about manna, God's provision for the people, this is always a picture of that provision. The laver is in there for washing. There are lots of things that are symbolic. But there is this actual bread that they put in there. They put it in there, they make it hot, they leave it for a little bit, and then they remove it, and the priest can eat it, and then they redo the bread over and over and over and over again. They keep fresh bread in there. But as they replace it with hot bread, they take it out. The priest is thinking, okay, I've got a kind of an end around here that I can do. There are 4 things that the priest does that are primary, that Jewish law says these are the 4 primary things that a priest his roles there are. First, you display God. You put God on display before the people. This is role number 1. Second is you take care of everything for the atonement. You navigate all the stuff for the atonement. The third is to intercede on the behalf of people, which is a big thing in Hebrews, and this is what Jesus does as a high priest. He's interceding at the right hand of God. And the last one is feed the hungry. So the loophole here, and the Mishnah later, and all of tradition says, the reason this was okay was the priest had he could feed the hungry. So he's like, okay, well, what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take the showbread. Your guys are hungry. I can do that. It's within my wherewithal. I'll put new hot bread out and I will feed them. It's a little bit of it still works. It doesn't break the law, if you will. But it's skirting the edge of the law. It's really close. And here's another thing. David was on no mission from the king. He's running from the king. The king is out to kill him. So everything he said is not even truthful there. So Jesus is like, you're all about King David. His men were hungry. And they don't just eat. They ate the showbread from the temple. And it must have been okay, because here's the deal. There's a level of it that's okay, because when Saul, his predecessor, decided to take things in his own hands and usurp the authority of the priesthood, it's one of the worst things he ever did. And God and Samuel are like, no, you can't do that. In this particular case, I guess it's close enough in the Old Testament, but Jesus is like, look, do you understand what the heart of this was? He's like, we're doing this. It's not even close to even what David did. But what he's trying to show them, even in this little bit, is to get back to the heart of what God intended. If part of the priest was to feed the hungry, I don't think, it's like God's heart is not to just keep food away from people. And to eat, to take grain and to rub it and take it and get the wheat apart and to eat some because they're a little bit hungry. It's like, this is not work. Guys, you've gone way too far with your mindset of what work is and what keeping the Sabbath is. Of course, they're still always trying to catch Jesus, trying to catch his disciples and what they were. Jesus said that he said, on the part I read in Matthew 23, you are more concerned about your little laws instead of the weightier parts. The faithfulness, the love, the mercy that God stands behind the law. And this is what they kept running into. He then makes another reference, and he says, what about the priests? What they do on the Sabbath profanes the Sabbath. What is he talking about there? The priests, it's within the law that they profane the Sabbath, according to what they're saying work is. Because in Numbers 28, 9 and 10 it says, on the Sabbath day, take 2 male lambs a year old without blemish, 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour and grain offering. Mix it with oil and make a drink offering. then there's a burnt offering on every Sabbath, besides a regular burnt offering and its drink offering. In fact, if you read Numbers 28, there's a long thing that they have to do every time the Sabbath rolls around on the Saturday. And the priest is working hard. He's preparing the meal, and he's cooking, and he's got the burnt offering, he's got the flour, and he's in the kitchen. He's just slaving. It's Sunday dinner, He's in there working. It's work. But God had commanded that. So if that's work, then he's profaning the Sabbath. Well, they're like, well, we know it's not. So he's like, okay, well, we can't accuse that because, we're good with David. We're good with the Levites. He's dropping, like, if you think this, then David is wrong. And if you think that, then the Levites are wrong. Oh, which, by the way, was God's command. So you're probably saying that God was wrong. And they're going, I don't know. So they're kind of backing off a little. They're a little bit, this is what Jesus does. He throws stuff out and puzzles them. Okay, we don't know what to say. And then for good measure, he throws in some reference to Hosea. He said, God, in this last part, desires mercy and not sacrifice. It's said a lot of places, but in Hosea, I desire mercy and not sacrifice. I've got a sacrificial system in place, and it's all based on law. But the heart behind it is mercy, because this is who God is. The mercy is the reason the sacrifice is there. And ultimately, the greatest mercy is the greatest sacrifice in Jesus Christ. And it wasn't the necessity of the blood and the animal, but it was the mercy that stood behind it, because God's trying to pour out His mercy, His forgiveness, His faithfulness. This is who God is. He's like, you're missing the point. You're working so hard to please God that you're running yourself ragged. And this is not the heart of God. You're missing God, and you're getting frazzled in so doing. And people a lot of times look into the church and go, so many do's and don'ts and laws, and it just makes me tired. And I get it, because that's not what the gospel is about. Mark 2:7 records the same event, and I'm just going to read the last part of 2:27. Is the recording of the same event. In the very end it says, and he said to them, the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. So at the end of this part we read in Matthew is very similar. But he adds a little bit more in Mark. Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. This idea of the Son of Man is the most common name that Jesus gives himself. But really what it is an identification with the fact that he is born of humanity. Because he was a person, a son of man. He's also son of God, son of David, a lot of these other names. But he's son of man. That means he's born like you and I are. He was born with human limitations. He was born with these limitations so that he could die a physical death. Because you can't kill God, but you can kill Jesus in his humanity. He came to not only live, but to live and suffer and take the penalty and die. And die not just a death, but a painful and horrible death. That his blood would actually spill out, that his body could be crushed for us. These are the things that were necessary, because he was ultimately a sacrifice, but not the sacrifice was so important, but the mercy behind it was still the reason. He said, the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. What he's trying to get across here is like, you're so worried about messing up the Sabbath in your humanity. You have burdened yourself with these laws, and the Sabbath becomes a drudgery to you. You're locking yourself in and holding yourself back and judging each other on whether you're doing the Sabbath or not. But the whole point is to rest. And I don't want to just give you physical rest, but I want to give you rest in your soul. I want you to relax. And you're far from relaxed. You're the opposite of that. Your tension level on the Sabbath is through the roof. You're so concerned that you're going to mess up. You're tripping over your own self. But he gives some other words about this too. Here's something I want to think about. Think about the Sabbath, what it was. It's made for, he said, like, I come to give you rest. It is all about rest, right? Here's something we learned. If you study science, it's sports science, we know this. Athletes have to take periods of rest to recover. If you just keep pushing through, keep pushing through, you'll probably injure yourself. Shin splints, there's all kinds of things, your body will start breaking down. But if you'll take a period of go hard and then rest and recover, go hard, rest and recover, you'll build. You'll actually gain. The rest part is just as important. We know this from the natural. We know in business, there's many studies. They've looked at it. What's the speed of business? What should we do? And they realize if they narrow down the work day, the work week, give more time off, and they do it periodically, and if they do it, they're always looking for ways. What's the best way to be productive? And layers of rest increase productivity wildly. You'll see this much more like in Japanese culture. They have just this, they inundate themselves with rest. And in Latin cultures, there's siesta. I think that's a great idea. I know some of us do that on Sunday, but man, siesta. A break in the middle of the day, the nap. And it's so funny, you go as a kid and they make you take a nap and you fight it, and later on you're like, man, I wish I could get down there on that pallet with you, buddy. You know, you're trying not to, but I'd love to, you know. Napping is good. It restores us. And a lot of studies have been done about people that press through, that try to do more. Riders that have said that they get into riding block, one of the best things to do, just stop and get away and move away from. We saw a show the other day. We watch a lot of cooking shows. They cook stuff I've never heard of and I will never eat. Like what's it, the gooey duck they pronounce? It's like, what kind of duck is that? Are y'all familiar with that? It's a giant clam. It's like this like shell. It's like this big, and the clam just hangs huge. It's the grossest looking thing. It's just so good. I'm like, I'll take your word for it. Sean's like, some of this stuff, so would you eat that? It's like, they'd have to put it on the plate in front of me. Just don't tell me what it is. I'm sure it tastes great, but I really don't want to know. Some of these high-end chefs. But with this one chef, he'd been a multiple Michelin star winner, and he'd written books, and he was gotten a little older, he had multiple restaurants, and he said, I realized I'd hit block, and I needed to get away from it. I was kind of doing the same thing over and over again. He's a world-renowned guy. So he just goes, what is it, Crocodile Dundee. He goes on walkabout. he unplugs, like, y'all got it, you can have it. And he just unplugged and just went around the world for a couple of years. I mean, obviously had a lot of money, but he said, and so he was on the show, he's like, I reinvented everything I know about cooking. He said, I just had to get away from it and go and see other people's stuff and discover food I've never seen and go places I've never been. And he completely reinvented everything about how he cooked. And it is amazing how often God said, this stuff works. Every 7 days, every 7 years, there are things that you do. You release people on certain dates. And God is a God about giving rest and giving restoration. And over again, this is who God is. He even said, take the crops never so often, let them rest. And later on, we figured out, crop rotation. It actually works. We're robbing nutrients, we put new ones in. Scientifically, we figured out, God said that a long time ago. There was a reason for it, but it works. God needs this. There's a cycle of rest that He intends for us, and it's a good thing. And we've come to a point of going, oh man, we're still like the 2-year-old kid. I gotta take a nap. Are you kidding me? I got work to do. We press on into the night. Studies show if you press on for a long period of time, your mental capacity is going to break down. You're not going to be as productive. Your physical is going to wear out. This is not how we're created. God created this for periods of rest. And I think He wants us to do that. I think He wants us to enjoy it. Just think of the harvest alone. The fruit of the harvest. There's sowing, there's growing, and there's mowing, right? We've got to do all this. But if that's all we ever see, and we always just do that, it's like we got to do this, to do this, to do this, to start over again. Oh man, drudgery. Or we can go, thank you God for this season and this one, and then we pause when the harvest comes in. and we eat the fruit of the labor. You know, there are multiple references about, you know, just taking the vineyards and, you know, just wine from your own vineyards and food from your own stock. And God's like, take and stop. You realize that God has, we think about the fasting that's in the Bible. There's a lot more feasting. God had them shut down, you know, to the tabernacles. It's like, take a week and everybody go live in tents for a while. And it's just a whole week of being with people, unplugged from the world. And it's a really kind of cool deal that we don't really do anymore. But God has rest over and over again. In Matthew 12, 9 through 14, this is the next part. If we continue on. And he says this. He went on from there and entered the synagogue. And a man was there with a withered hand. And he asked him, and they asked him, Jesus, is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath? So that they might accuse him. He said to them, which one of you has a sheep if it falls in a pit on the Sabbath? Will not take hold of it and lift it out? How much more valuable then is a man than a sheep? So it is lawful to do good on the Sabbath. Then he said to them, to the man, stretch out your hand. The man stretched out his hand, and Jesus restored him, healthy like the other. The Pharisees went out and conspired against him, how to destroy him. They're so mad. Oh, it just so happens he shows up in the temple, and there's a man there with a withered hand. This dude is playing it, okay? They're looking to try to catch him again. They know his past. He's so bold that he's willing to actually heal people on the Sabbath. Let me tell you what happens in this little story. I don't know if you might not know this. There is always within Jewish culture, there's always a debate going on. It's a nature of debate. They want debate. They want to ask a question, and they want to counter that. And they want to ask the hard side. They play what we call devil's advocate. I don't think they would use that. They would use God's advocate maybe. But they ask one side and then answer it. Point, counterpoint. Point, counterpoint. And there are always usually at least two schools of thought that are permeating. The two primary schools of thought about the time that Jesus was there were Shammai and Hillel. Okay? Doesn't matter a whole lot, but these are two schools of thought. But they're a little bit different. Now, earlier I talked about the fact that there are all these commands, you know, 10 commandments, 613, layers. Well, with these two schools of thought, Shammai and Hillel, both schools of thought believed all of the laws, but there's always a hierarchy of law that had to be done. So, for instance, in the Holocaust, if someone was going to be given up during that time, the Jewish people were being pressed in and they knew that the Nazis were coming in to kill, they would not pause at all to tell a lie in order to protect their family. And I think we all get that. Would you tell a lie and that? Yeah, to the Nazis, of course. So that it wouldn't kill my whole family? Well, I'm sorry, it's against the law. I'm going to have to tell you where they are. No, there's a greater law in effect. So there's a hierarchy of law. So the schools of thought were to figure out which laws were higher than the others. The highest law was always love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind. The love of God on both sides. Yep, number one, absolutely. But Hillel would take the second law is love your neighbor as yourself. That was like law 6 to Shammai. Their second law was keep the Sabbath. So keeping the Sabbath superseded helping another person. But by Jesus saying some of the things that he said here, as he prioritized people over the Sabbath, it probably started, but it was enough like you had Pharisees and Sadducees, is there a resurrection or not? And, you know, when he would agree that there was a resurrection, those Pharisees are clapping, the Sadducees are mad. But they're mad at each other. So he's getting under their skin. He's stirring up bees. There are 8 primary questions that they would always ask in schools of thought, that they would go through and to try to determine where your thought processes were on the priority of law. One of the questions that they always used was a scenario where if your donkey falls in a pit on the Sabbath, will you rescue the donkey? and then they have to go through and explain why they would. Both schools of thought at the end of the day would say it's okay, but it's very different how they arrive there. Rather than going into all of it, just know this: Jesus is pulling on that thread. Like, what about if a sheep fell? Sheep is even more important to their society. Donkeys were very important, but they're like, oh man. And then he ups the ante. He says, well, should I heal a person? Isn't a person more important than a sheep? And they're like, darn, here we go again. He's meddling again. So they're not going to challenge him on that. And if they do, they're probably going to either mess with Hillel or Shammai, and they're going to start arguing with each other. So they just let it go. And they're like, yeah, it probably is okay, but we want this to not be okay because we want to get this guy because they're upset that he's messing with their authority. That's what's all going on. But he's throwing this out, and it's not just randomly or arbitrary. It was a question that they asked regularly at that time. And he throws it out there to confound them. And the basis of it over and over again is that God is the God of the Sabbath, and the Sabbath is made for your rest. And that's why it was put together. It's rest from the law that you think that matters. It's rest from that stuff that's burdened you. And if you look back now at Matthew 11, just before this Matthew 12 that we've been reading, look back at Matthew 11, 25 and 30. This is what Jesus spoke of just before all this happened. And he's addressing this exact thing. And I think this may be one of the reasons that they were kind of ticked off and out to get him. They already were anyway. But look at 25 through 30 of Matthew 11. At that time, Jesus declared, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you've hidden these things from the wise and the learned and revealed them to the little children. This is a reference to teachers and kids again. A lot of times the little children, he even referred to his disciples a lot of time. There's the learned and the little children. It's rabbis and their followers. Yes, Father, for this was well-pleasing in your sight. All things have been entrusted to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. The same terminology of the Sabbath. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The yoke specifically is a reference to a rabbi and a student. They talked about a yoke over and over again. Now the yoke is physically like between two oxen. You yoke them together and they pull together in a line. And Jesus says, my yoke is easy, my burden is light. The yoke is a specific reference to, they use a lot of times, a teacher and a student. And some of them were deliberately like, oh, he's tough. Like sometimes we're like, oh boy, that coach is tough. He's going to make him tough. It doesn't necessarily mean he's a better coach. He's just really hard. Toward the Junction Boys, you know, the story of what they went through, I don't want that. When I was in high school, water's for wimps, and it's not a good idea. You know, there's some things that we do in the name of toughness and they are not always so good. But Jesus said, my point is, I want you to rest. He said, if you're yoked to me, I'm going to be doing all the pulling. My yoke is easy. My burden is light. Yoke, to me, this is the way I am as a rabbi. Now, there's some that would lord it over, but that's not the way I am. My idea is that you would get rest even as we're yoked together. He set all that up before all this happens, where they go into the temple and they're trying to get him. Jesus' plan and God's plan is that we would have restful times. We look at the law, we look at the Sabbath, and we think, oh man, it's a burden. No, if you feel the burden, then that means you're pulling. You think your do's and your don'ts are the things that are saving you. You need to rest and rely on God who's there with you. His burden is light. This is his point. If you go on then, later down in Matthew, we finished a minute ago in 14. Let me read 15 following. Jesus, aware of this, withdrew from there. Now remember, they're trying to get him. I think I'll make sure I didn't skip anything I wanted to say here. They're really trying to get him. All right? You know what? I'm going to say something else before I go there. He wants rest for our souls, and we always think that it is about, so many times about our doing. We add the extra layers so we don't get into and mess up the things he said. This is something that we've done even from the very beginning. If you go in the garden, the serpent shows up in Genesis 3. I land there so many times. But he goes to Eve and said, did God say you can't eat anything? He's like, no. He said we could eat everything but that which is in the center of the garden, which God didn't say. But to her, it was the center of the garden, this tree. And then he said, no, not only should we not eat it, but we shouldn't even touch it. Now that's her Mishnah, if you will. Because God didn't say anything about touching it. But sometimes that's what we do. In order that we would protect ourselves from eating it, we could cut off from it even by not even touching it. And so sometimes we layer on. I think of this as being like boundaries for kids. I've always had this picture of God having this, like, the best boundaries are this. If you have a really, really nice playground that, it doesn't have, not like the playground that I grew up on that had, was metal and had a 20-degree pitch slide. It was 20 feet in the air and it was 1,000 degrees in the sun. It had metal edges that would cut you, and survive the slide and live. Go to the playground. Okay, it's an adventure. Get on the monkey bars. I remember a kid falling off the monkey bars when I was a kid. He just shattered his arm in like 4 places, and playgrounds can be. Now we got all these padded playgrounds and stuff. So we look for, as parents, what's a great playground. We want a playground that has very safe equipment, but we need a lot of it. And we need very well-defined fence that goes all the way around it. Because Lord knows if it's not, there could be tigers out there first. Hopefully not. But there could be other kind of predators. So we want to know what our boundaries are. We take our kids into a playground. The playground's got to have a lot of fun stuff. The kids won't like it. But it needs some safety and boundaries around it. And the reality is sometimes people get so tight on their boundaries that the kids don't like it. Or they're so loose with their boundaries that it's not safe. And that's kind of the world that we live in, the angst and the tension that we have even now. But here's the deal. God said, I have come and my burden is light. And what he said was, I want to give you rest for your souls. For your very souls. It's not just about rest for your body, but for your souls, which is the battleground, the place that we live in. All right, now we got that. Now we can go to Matthew 12, 15 through 21. Jesus was aware, and he withdrew from there. He was aware that they were going to try to get him. And many people followed him. He healed them all. He ordered them not to make it known. So I don't want this to be a fuss about. I don't want it to be about anything but my love for you. And this was to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet Isaiah. And this comes from Isaiah 42. Behold my servant whom I have chosen, my beloved with whom my soul is well pleased. I put my spirit on him. He will proclaim justice to Gentiles. He will not quarrel or cry aloud, nor will anyone hear his voice in the streets. A bruised reed he will not break, a smoldering wick he will not quench, until he brings justice to victory, and his name the Gentiles will hope. This is from Isaiah in the Old Testament. God's always had a plan, and it's to bring people back to him. This is a word to Gentiles, which would have been really awkward to the Jewish people. And this is a fulfillment of it right here. I'm going to call in everyone. Salvation is what I'm about. Mercy and grace. I will be faithful to heal you. Come to me, all who are weary and heavy burden. I'll give you rest. And really, we're kind of all under that. If we try to pull that yoke ourselves, we're going to be weary and heavy burdened. And I think that's what we do. When we don't rely on Jesus and we see the law as a burden, we don't do this, we do this. There's a big movement now of a lot of people that are like, and I'm not going to go to church because, the church is not a building and I don't need that. And I understand what they're saying, but there are a lot of people that are doing that because they just don't want to be among the people. Because it's messy among the people. The problem is we're all messy, right? And I get that. But the beauty of it is, here's the thing. We miss it when we don't do that. Because he said, I want you to be among each other. Love the Lord your God with your heart, soul, strength, and mind. Love your neighbor, love yourself. These are the things that I have for you, and I want the best for you. I want better for you. And you need each other. It's not good to be alone. I don't do well alone. I need people. When I mess up, I need to be around people to talk it out. And it doesn't matter how long I've been saved in the church, what building it's in. And it doesn't. There are churches all over town, but there's one church, and that's true. But get among the body of believers, and here's the thing I think happens so often. A lot of people might say that, but the alternative is they're not among anyone. No, you don't have to be in a building, but get among the people of God. And regularly pray, ask God for direction. Be among other people. Man, here's my burden. And by the way, what's yours? Pray with each other, for each other. Make a difference. And I think as I do that, that's where I find rest. Because when I'm out there trudging on my own, I just can't get there. I can't. I find burden over and over and over again. I've got to trust God first in everything I do. And he said, being among people, it's not easy. It wasn't easy the ones he was among. I mean, his very disciples. I mean, putting up with Peter all the time. Peter's asking these questions like, oh man, not one of those questions again. But they're all the questions that we would have been asking if we're honest, right? Like, I would want to know, why do you wash your feet? That's goofy. What? You're going to go die? No, you're not. I'm going to use this sword. I'm going to cut this dude's ear off. You don't want me to do that? I don't understand. In our humanity, we'll make different choices. And it'll be tough. We need each other because we need each other to grow and to go back to and always rely on God for everything. Because ultimately, it's not about the other people. Here's the deal. I'm going to mess up and upset people. You're going to mess up and upset people because we're people. Now, whether you're in the church or out of the church, you're still going to do it. All of us are in some body of believers. All of us are learning from somewhere. But if you will be yoked to Jesus, his burden is easy. His yoke will give rest to your soul. This is really what you're after. So the lie of the enemy is this. Following after the law of God is work. It's do's and it's don'ts. Now those are the results of your relationship with Jesus. And you do things because you love him and it makes sense and it connects, helps other people. And you stop doing things because it hurts you. And in the meantime, as you're going along, you realize, oh, I can just rest in Jesus in this. And if I fall down, it doesn't matter. He's got the yoke. I just stand back up. We're still moving because he's pulling. And I can just rest in it. I see myself sometimes on the opposite side of the yoke, just hanging in the air and swinging, So have you ever had a couple guys carrying a big piece of wood or something, they're on one on each end, and there's a kid who comes and jumps in the middle and I'm helping, and you're carrying them in the air. I think that's kind of what it's like. His yoke is easy. His burden is light. Our rest is in him. And if we just receive that and understand that law is not about putting more burdens on us. Oh, the accuser is going to continue to come and tell you that. But focus on the weightier matters. Faithfulness, hope, love, mercy, the things that God has. And I think that our life will be so much better. Love God, love our neighbor, and let him take care of the rest. And I think this is the core of it all. Let's pray. Lord, thank you so much that you're a mighty God who invades our lives. Each one of us individually has the opportunity to have a relationship with you. And our relationship with you is more powerful than our side. Because God, your side is the one that does all the work. So may we rest in you, God. And this day, may we rest. May we do it literally. Some of us go get a siesta and be okay about it. Eat some food, relax, spend some time with some friends, with some family. Do a little feasting, not just fasting. And trust you, Father God, that you're with us. May we go from here and feel the confidence that you're the God who's for us. And bless this day, because you've surely blessed us. In Jesus' your precious name we pray. Amen. If there's anything that you need in way of prayer for anything in the world, for healing, for family, there are layers of things that we need. And I want to encourage you just that we would pray for you. I'll be up here if you want to pray. Grab someone else. You're the priesthood of believers. Pray for one another. I just remembered we put the tithe box back. This is off the wall here. We put the tithe box back in the back. When we do the giving and offering, sometimes there's a suggestion we can have the box back there. Some like to give there. You can do that. I know a lot of you give online and however you want to do it. Again, that's not how we do it is just under the Lord. I pray that when you give, that you've had that feeling too, that's a get to, not a got to. And that as you do, that God will bring blessing to you in that way as well. All right, so good day for you all. May you go in peace, and may God who loves you comfort you as you go. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.